it's still attached. Ooh, that body right, but you notice that. Ooh, I drop a picture, now these girl attack. Ayy, don't let that gas you up and get you whacked. I make a call and get a neck smack. This time I pullin' up, well, where you at? Ooh, I'm in a lamb, catch me if you can. Ooh, I'm kicking just out they spot, Stelly Chan. Yeah, you say I taste like sugar, but ain't sweet.
Good evening and welcome back. If you're joining me, it's gone 7 p.m. and you know this is the place to be every Thursday between 7 to 8 p.m. with myself, Dr. Deshni Chanan, on Medical Matters on Capital Radio. So this evening's show is all about you, and remember, it's a show where you decide the topics and it's a show where you tell us what you want to hear. And remember, you can always get a hold of us on 0654211380 with any questions that you might have throughout the show. The 7th of April was World Health Awareness Day, and it's a day that's used to recognize the widespread contributions of our medical fraternities. And each year, the World Health Organization selects a theme which highlights a particular priority area of public health. The theme for this year of Global Health Awareness is Building a Fairer, Healthier World. I thought it would be perfect to tie this in with Homeopathy Awareness Week, which actually starts from the April 10th to April 16th. And it's a time to learn more about this incredible profession and its contribution to health and awareness in the world. So joining us this evening is two incredible homeopathic doctors, Dr. Shiromani Hariprasad and Dr. Greg Thiel, who have graciously agreed to be on our show today to answer any of the questions that you might have throughout. So just a little introduction on both of them. Dr. Shiromani Hariprasad is a registered allied health professional in South Africa. She's a homeopathic doctor and runs a private practice in the Greater Durban area. She's been involved in private practice for the last 11 years. She has an ardent passion for sharing knowledge and teaching, and this has actually taken her back to her roots at the Durban University of Technology, where she serves both as a lecturer and clinician and is involved intensely on homeopathic research. Joining us as well is Dr. Greg Thiel, who shares her inherent affinity for holistic healthcare and diagnostics and has been a driving force behind his career. He holds an MBA diploma. He has 2 master's degrees, both in homeopathy and chiropractic. He's opened his private practice in 2014, and this has allowed himself time to grow, and he's actually expanded in both the Durban and Port Elizabeth areas. Dr. Thiel has a keen interest in specialization with pediatric chiropractic, as well as successfully completing many courses within this area. So we're going to use his expertise to talk about specifically homeopathy today. We've made this very clear to him because he has a love of both professions. So we hope that we're going to enjoy the evening together. So thank you so much for joining me this evening. I know how busy both of you are, so thank you so much for taking that time.
Hi, Desh. Thank you very much for having us both.
That's great. So remember, guys, you can always get a hold of us on 0654211380, and that's our WhatsApp line. So if you have any questions, we will be keen to answer them. You can also catch us on our Facebook Live page, which is the Capital Radio Facebook Live. Alternatively, we are streaming live on Radio Garden as well as our Mixcloud account. So these are all the platforms you can always get a hold of us on. So diving straight into homeopathy. So for lots of people, they aren't very aware of what homeopathy is. So Dr. Hariprasad, do you want to give us a quick introduction on what homeopathy is in homeopathic medicine?
Okay, let's just give it a brief start. So homeopathic medicine is an alternative, complementary form of medicine, I would say. So if one does not want to go to a GP, for example, they would visit a homeopathic doctor. Mm-hmm. So medication that would be given that's homeopathic is completely natural and completely safe for a person. Mm-hmm. So the key words that we like to drive back home is natural, alternative, and complementary medicine as an alternative to any other medical profession.
Okay. So, Dr. Thiel, quickly, how widespread is the use of homeopathy across the world, though?
I think it's fairly widespread, Desh. The last time I saw, or I did any sort of research on that, I think it was the sort of second most utilized form of medicine, apart from your mainstream medicine.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned something when you looked at and you said research, and so one of the questions with patients is there any research or evidence base behind homeopathy?
In terms of, sorry, research based.
Yes. So lots of people aren't exactly sure about where homeopathy fits in and whether there's any research behind its efficacy and how well it's used.
There's a fair amount of research, and then I think what's been a driving force behind homeopathy and the institutions that we have nowadays is the fact that we've tried to make it as scientifically based as possible. So if you look at our course, the majority of our course relies on the patient doing a number, or not the patient, the student doing a fair amount of your normal natural sciences and your the same sort of subjects that the medical students would study. We actually, in my time at DUT, I remember having the professors from the medical schools and the varsities come and do the curriculums with us, the same things that they were teaching their med students at the time. So the majority of our studying is based in medicine and science, and thereafter we sort of go, we split, and then we start looking at all the homeopathic alternatives in terms of prescribing and the medicines, like Dr. Harmanis was mentioning earlier.
Okay. So I'm going to go back to Dr. Hariprasad. So like Dr. Thiel said, you start off on a natural science base where you are based in anatomy, physiology, biochemistry. That is your foundation, which is very similar to medicine. And then you deviate into more of the homeopathic sciences. So can you explain a little bit more about what type of medicine that is? How do you come to that conclusion?
Okay, when we, yes, exactly what you said. When we studied this course, in the first 3 years, we would do all the health sciences, the biology and the histologies and anatomies and things like that. And then when we got into our fourth year, fifth year, that's when we branch into the diagnostics, the clinical components. And it's important to have that background, because when patients do see us, we are consulting, diagnosing as a primary healthcare practitioner. If one visits us, we will be doing all of that in practice per se. So when we look at diagnosing a patient, we would obviously take a full case history, which is very important for us as homeopaths, and look at a patient and their signs and symptoms or their disease in a very, we call it in totality. So based on that, we would, if we need to, recommend the patient to go for any sort of blood work or an X-ray or some sort of an ultrasound. We would do that on our personal capacity, and we would have those results at our discretion. So from there, when we make this diagnosis, we would dispense homeopathic medication, as we would call it. So based on the patient's signs and symptoms, again, very individualized treatment is given to a patient with homeopathic medicine. So if we look at homeopathic medicine, and for example, let's take the common cold and flu. And if we're treating 5 different patients, all 5 patients may not be needing the same medication, because each one's cold and flu might be of a different picture.
Okay.
So that's where homeopathy is very unique, in the sense that you have a cold and flu picture, and your medication can be very tailor-made for you, your homeopathic medicine in specific.
Okay.
For example.
Okay, so Dr. Thiel, Dr. Hariprasad actually mentioned homeopathic medication. So I'm going to just ask the obvious question. What exactly does that mean? What is homeopathic medication?
Homeopathic medicine is derived from any sort of natural substance that we then dilute. It goes through a series of dilutions. So one of the sort of skeptical viewpoints is that we take our medicines through a series of dilutions, and we're to the point where there's no source of the original substance. But if you look at chemistry and you look at the principles of chemistry, there are a couple of laws. There's the Arndt-Schultz law, and there's the principle of hormesis. And basically what happens is you get a state where a substance is inhibitory or it's excitatory. And in a highly concentrated form, a substance appears to be more inhibitory, and in a more dilute or highly diluted form, it becomes more excitatory. So homeopathic medicines is taking a particular substance, whatever it may be, from a natural source. It's diluting it through a series of many, many dilutions, and then giving it to the patient to elicit a response which gets the immune system to respond in a certain way, which will essentially benefit the patient. So it's stimulating the immune system to then fight off whatever pathogen or whatever disease it then encounters.
Okay. So there's a lot of science that actually does go behind homeopathic medicine and the profession at large. Am I right?
Absolutely. Yeah, there is.
Definitely.
There is a lot of science, and it's become more sort of scientifically based. And I think we, to gain sort of trust and sort of recognition from the general public, because we've all been sort of led in a scientific sort of world, and everything needs to be tested and proven, and so I think they've done a good job in basing the principles of homeopathy and in science, basically.
Okay. So who would make use of homeopathy, Dr. Hariprasad? Who would come to see you?
We would have a wide variety of people. If we just divide them, we'd have the pediatric field, right, where moms want to bring their babies. We'd look at the geriatrics, for example. We would look at male and female fertility, and anyone on a broad scale. If they do not want to see a GP or any other doctor, they can see a homeopath, because a homeopathic doctor is considered one that can look after your primary health. So on a broad scale, it is basically anyone that can visit a homeopath.
Okay. So one of the biggest questions that I've always been asked is, can you combine both allopathic medicine and homeopathic medicine all together? So if you're going to a GP and you're taking medication for a particular condition, and you also want to try homeopathic medicines for maybe either the same condition or something different, can you combine the two together?
Yes, absolutely. We often get this. Well, I often get this in practice as well, where you have a patient come to you and they've seen their specialist, or they've seen their GP, and now they want to consult with you. And can we take these medicines together? And yes, absolutely. It is safe, provided that one does it with their practitioner and not sort of over the counter, where you're purchasing something and you may not know if it does have an effect with you or not. So I always say, do this with a practitioner, with a registered practitioner that you've consulted with, so you would know if you are on any allopathic medication, and if you are combining your homeopathic with it, if it interferes or not. Can you take it at the same time? Can we, take it at 2 different times in the day? So you are aware of this. But yes, both medications can be taken at the same time.
Okay. So Dr. Theo, with homeopathic medication, are there any side effects that patients can feel?
I think with anything, Dish, I think with any sort of thing, you can get side effects, and I'd be very skeptical. I know our side effects are minimal. I mean, compared to your conventional medication and all the rest of it, our side effects are minimal. But I think with anything, there's the potential for side effects. So one of the ways in which we formulate our remedies is we do provings. And provings essentially is taking a particular remedy and giving it to a bunch of healthy individuals, and we then we document all the signs and symptoms that they then present with. So essentially, if you were to take a remedy to a person that wasn't ill, and again the proving, and it would present with that particular illness, whether it's an itch or whatever it is, it would be mild. It is not, like I say, it's not the dramatic or serious side effects that you would get with your allopathic or your conventional chemical drugs. but I would be skeptical to say that there would be no side effects.
Okay, okay. So what's very interesting to note that people might not actually realize is when you mentioned, where we talked about evidence-based research, is a lot of I know at DUT, the students have to qualify having done a research dissertation, and that's a lot of the times where the provings come in, where you now pick either a condition or something that you want to use a remedy for to be able to prove, and you're able to now actually look at what is happening when you prescribe this to a patient, and you're able to chart the actual processes, what is expected, what isn't, and it gives you almost like a direction when another practitioner wants to use that remedy for a particular condition.
Yeah, absolutely. So with regards to that, your certain things. So and what comes to mind there is if you've got a patient that's going in for an operation. So your arnica. Your arnica is used for blood flow, for obviously aches and pains and injuries, which we all use arnica for. But there's certain, and we'll probably listen to the subject or the topic of potencies. And there are certain potencies that we try and stay away from with patients that are going into certain operations or about to have an operation, because you don't want increased chance of bleeding, obviously, after or during the operation. So we would then start using various potencies as opposed to others in the arnica, when we're using arnica with those particular patients.
Good. So I'm so glad you mentioned it, because potencies, for anyone that's wanting to always, is a strength of the remedy. So it's kind of it's similar to like when you get started on, say for instance, hypertensive medication, and your doctor might start you off on 5 milligrams, and then you escalate to 10 or 20 depending on what you might need. So Dr. Haiprasad, do you want to explain a little bit more about what potency means and the different dosages that you can have?
Okay, as you've mentioned, it's the different strengths now based on when we consult and we've taken the case and the severity of each patient's signs and symptoms. This is where we would choose either which potency to give them. So when we choose the potency, we would choose if we want to give it to them in either a form of a tablet, little granules, pilules, or if we want to dispense them in a liquid. So it might vary. It depends on different patients, different conditions, how we want to treat them, how acute and how chronic that patient's diagnosis is at that point in time. So yeah, that's how we would choose that.
Okay, so one of the things with homeopathic medication that I've had patients say to me is they feel that homeopathic medication works too slowly. So, Dr. Thiel, do you want to respond to that? Is homeopathic medication slow in action?
I think there are two parts to that question. So I think we're a society who are used to or become accustomed to instant gratification. And I think generally speaking, I think most people know that anything that comes too quickly and too easily is not worth its weight in gold. But in saying that, I've had particular cases where we prescribed homeopathic meds, and it's incredible how quickly they have cleared up. And I mean, the patients have been, the thing with homeopaths is we generally see patients as a last resort. A lot of people will swear by homeopaths and come to us as their first line, but the majority of the time it's as a last resort. So those same patients have been on antibiotics and all the other conventional drugs that they've used over that period of time. They've come to us, and a lot of people get relief. And a lot of the time that is fairly quick in terms, or certainly in relation to the time that they've spent on all the other conventional drugs. So I think it may apply sometimes, but not all the time.
Okay, I'm so glad you brought that up about it being a last resort to lots of people. So I'm going to ask, what do you find is some of the myths or obstacles that you find that people face when looking at homeopathic medicine as an option?
With regards to the myths that in homeopathy, I think the biggest myth that we come to is that it's all placebo. So it's just a matter of mind over matter, which I believe in the mind, and I believe that in terms of the strength of the mind is incredible. So I would never take the mind out of play. However, that doesn't, I do a lot of, like you said earlier, I have a keen interest in pediatrics. the babies that we're giving drops to, I may be wrong. I don't think they realize that it's any homeopathic or any of any medicinal value when we give it to them.
Yeah.
A lot of animals. There are a lot of people that treat animals with homeopathy. And we're putting little granules. We're putting little drops in their water. We're putting granules in their food. Again, I may be mistaken, but I don't think the animal realizes that when they're drinking that water, it has sort of any medicinal value in it. And they respond very, very positively.
Okay.
So I think that, to me, that would rule out the placebo effect.
Okay. Okay. So, Hariprasad, what has been your perception from patients or the public at large with regards to homeopathy?
As mentioned, you would get a lot of patients coming to you because they've resorted to seeing other practitioners or being to other modalities of treatment for whatever condition they've treated, and obviously they failed or they didn't get the results they were looking for. So they perhaps heard of homeopathy, or somebody has recommended them see the homeopath down the road, or they've read about it, and that's how they get to you. And then you do get the lot of people that they know of homeopathy, they've used it for years, they know there's no side effects to it, and you can use it with conventional medication, and they would use it as a first line therapy, and go to a homeopathic doctor. So in I would say currently the times are changing. A lot of patients now are a lot more open to homeopathic medicine and seeing a homeopathic practitioner, as opposed to if we look at in the last 10 years, for example. And yes, there's a lot more homeopaths practicing these days. And if you look at you shopping at your Clicks and your Dis-Chems and things, you're finding a lot of homeopathic medication over the counter as well. And patients are purchasing this, so then they start reading about it, and then it leads them to another path where they start looking for a practitioner to consult with. And when one consults with a homeopathic practitioner, I think that's where the biggest difference comes in, and they realize, okay, this is real. This is, you're sitting in front of a doctor who's doing exactly what a medical doctor would do. So yes, perception is definitely changing.
Okay. That's very interesting. And you mentioned that it's such a homeopathic medicine is so widely available now, and you can get it off the counter. So how safe is taking that medication off the counter to be able to use at your own leisure at home, Dr. Theo?
It depends on the case, but as Dr. Hariprasad mentioned earlier, you should always consult a homeopathic practitioner or professional. There is the sort of misconception that it's, I'm going to do it all on my own. That if you go the natural route, I'm doing it all on my own, and I can just go into the pharmacy and I'll see the little label on the bottle that for a urinary tract infection or whatever it may be. That's a large part of our training is to diagnose or to spot red flags. So it's, with patients that have abdominal pain. So then it may be something much more sinister. It may be an acute appendicitis, maybe a number of things. And that is why essentially you would go, and even if you want to go along the alternative or the natural route or the homeopathic route, it's always advisable to go and see a homeopath so they can do a full examination to rule out the red flags and then prescribe whatever homeopathics you may need for that, whatever it may be.
Okay, so that's the value of having to go to a practitioner, because as much as you can read about a condition and you have an idea, okay, this is what it is, because a lot of the internet is very vast, information is very freely available, and a lot of patients come self-diagnosed. But there's all these intricate things that you mentioned now, like things like red flags or things that you need to pay attention to that is not always necessarily explained in online articles or online reading where patients make their own diagnosis. And these little things that we might notice that we are trained diagnostically to recognize makes a difference in diagnosing a particular patient, whether it's something that's going to be something simply treated or something that needs to be has a little bit more sinister implications and needs to be taken seriously. And that's the value of having to actually see a practitioner, as opposed to being able to take online anything offline, or be able to go over the counter and ask for medication. And that's something that's very important that lots of patients need to also understand, because like you both also mentioned, these patients usually present late, and it's also because they've tried everything else, and it's also a lot of the time self-diagnosis that tends to happen. Um, with homeopathic medications, are there things, if you're buying them over the counter, that you would suggest that you should have as like almost like a first aid kit, Dr. Hariprasad, that you should have at home?
Yes, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to mention any names, but if you look at your Diskems and your Clicks, a lot of the health stores as well, they do have a sort of ready-made kit that's called the Pegasus, where it gives you, it's about 20 odd remedies that are your basic remedies that one could utilize if you're coming down with a flu or anything very acute, and it gives you a little leaflet in there so you know how to utilize that. And it's when you purchase this, it's also on the lower end of the potencies, as with say like milligrams in a capsule or a tablet. So this is over the counter. You're purchasing this, you are self-diagnosing, remember, because you haven't done this with the practitioner, and you're going to be taking that sort of medication. So also, just to clear that, a lot of the times I know I've had patients where they went to the store, or they went to some sort of online shop, for example. They've purchased remedies, or they've purchased a little kit, and they've taken the medicine, and then they would contact you and say, oh no, but this homeopathic medicine did not work for so-and-so condition. And that's where we'd come in again, and I'd even emphasize that, yes, it's important to consult with the homeopath, because you don't know if that strength or that potency was indicated for that condition at that point in time. Sounds a little bit sensitive, but important in that sense. And so that we don't overdose, we can at times where we take more remedy than what is needed for a particular condition, and that's when we can prove the remedy and start proving symptoms of what we initially took it for.
Okay.
So it's important on that aspect. If I am allowed to mention names, I can give other few brands. Pegasus is a common one. Natura is a common one. The Bioforce as well. Over the counter, you get them in tissue salts, you get them in pilules and tablets. Really easy to use, but then again, use with caution. I would always say use with caution.
Okay. So, Dr. Theo, in terms of taking homeopathic medication, is there any advice or precautions, like times you should take it, how you should take it, storage of homeopathic medication, that you could advise people that do actually have them?
Absolutely. So with regards to taking medication, we always say we stipulate a small time period, 15 to 20 minutes away from food, or anything that could counteract the efficacy of the medication. So there are certain things that counteract the efficacy of the medication. It's a very sort of sensitive form of medication. So we talk about it in terms of sort of an energy-based form of healing. And like brushing your teeth or anything like that. So we want to leave a gap at least 15 to 20 minutes away from either taking any sort of food, coffee, or brushing teeth. And other medications, just with regards to the actual remedies themselves, you can get remedies that would aggravate a situation or a pathology or a condition. So if you've got a skin condition, if you've got eczema or anything like that, if you are prescribing sulfur, for instance, it's one of the things that we say to patients: if you don't believe that homeopathy works, and if you've got a bad case of eczema, well, let's give you a dose of sulfur, and we can see how you feel, because it has the ability to irritate or aggravate the symptoms initially, thereafter healing it. So we, like a remedy sulfur, we would tend to, if the patient has the worst sort of aggravation at night, then we would tend to steer to giving the remedy early in the morning as opposed to at the time of the aggravation.
Okay. So for everyone joining us, we'll be talking homeopathy, as Homeopathy Awareness Week is from the 10th of April to the 16th of April. And we're tying it into World Health Awareness Day, which was on the 7th of April. So it's an idea of trying to promote and explain a little bit more about homeopathy, because it's an incredible form of treatment that I feel like might be a bit underutilized. So to give you a bit of information for those of you that are curious about it and have been scared to ask any questions, here's your platform to be able to ask our specialists. So joining us in studio is Dr. Craig Thiel and Dr. Shurmi Hariprasad, who are homeopaths in the Greater Durban area. So remember, if you have any questions, you can always get a hold of us on 065 4211 As you know, unfortunately, we tend to always cut halfway through our session, but we have a playlist from our guest today. I'm going to leave you with one of the songs to start off the playlist today, and it is Weirdo by Jethro Tate. And I hope you enjoyed, and we'll be back in about a minute or so.
You have 5 more messages. Message 1. Message deleted. Message 2. Message deleted.
Let me off, I need a break. Was I put here by mistake? I'm sick of feeling out of place on this planet. Find a place away from here. Take a left and leave me there, where insecurity and fear seem to vanish. Do we become the things that we believe? I told myself there's something wrong with me. I'm just a quiet kid from down south, stuck writing sad songs for my house. I like being at home by myself. I'm a weirdo. I find it real hard to keep friends. I don't wanna go out and make plans. Head full of daydreams and pretend. Guess I'm a weirdo. Is it weird though? I'm a weirdo. Pull me in, I'm out of touch. I'm always high and think too much, and getting drunk's become a crutch. It's so manic. I love the stage but hate the crowds. I get overwhelmed and feel without. I get in my head, it gets me down, and I start to panic. I'm just a quiet kid from down south, stuck writing sad songs for my health. I like being at home by myself. I'm a weirdo. I find it real hard to keep friends. I don't wanna go out or make plans. Head full of daydreams and pretend. Yes, I'm a weirdo. Is it weird though? I'm a weirdo. I guess that we become what we believe. I tell myself there's nothing wrong with me. I'm just a quiet kid from down south, stuck writing sad songs for my health. I like being at home by myself. I'm a weirdo. I find it real hard to keep friends. I don't wanna go out or make plans. Head full of daydreams and pretend. Guess I'm a weirdo. Is it weird though? I'm a weirdo. I'm a weirdo. I'm a weirdo. I'm a weirdo.
It's a cold night in my bed in the heat of the summer. I've been waiting patiently for a beautiful lover. He's not a cheater, a believer. He's a warm, warm-blooded achiever. It's a lonely night in my bed in the heat of the summer. Oh, it's so hard when you're with someone. Your heart breaks and it ain't no fun. But I gotta take that risk tonight. I'm ready.
It's a hot night in my head in the chill of the winter. No, I've been looking hard for a lover disguised as a sinner. No, not a cheater, a redeemer. He's a cold, cold-blooded defeater. It's a hot night in my head in the chill of the winter. No,
It's so hard when you're with someone, your heart breaks and it ain't over. But I gotta take that risk tonight.
I'm ready, I'm ready, I'm ready, I'm ready for someone to love me. I'm ready, I'm ready, I'm ready, I'm ready for someone to love me, for someone to love me.
It's a cold night in my bed in the heat of the summer.
No, I've been looking hard for a lover disguised as a sinner.
I'm ready for someone to love me. To love me, for someone to love me.
Good evening. If you're joining me, it's just gone 1936, and you're listening to myself, Dr. Deshni Chanan, on Medical Matters on Capital Radio. And this evening, we're talking about homeopathy in anticipation of Homeopathy Awareness Week, which is starting on the 10th of April, and it extends till the 16th. So we want to tie it into World Health Day, which is talking about the awareness of medical facilities across the world. And homeopathy brings an incredible medical platform that many people that are unaware of. So joining us in studio today is Dr. Shiromni Hariprasad and Dr. Greg Thiel, who are going to talk a little bit more about homeopathy. And we hope that we've explained a little bit more about what it is, where it fits in, and the type of medication that you can get with homeopathy and how it is used. So if you have any questions about homeopathy, please feel free to contact us on 065 4211 380. Remember, we are streaming on our Facebook Live page as well as our Radio Garden and our Mixcloud account. So we're going to dive back straight into it. One of the questions that I've been asked a lot is, how has homeopathy fared in the wake of COVID-19? How is the role improved, or where is the role in homeopathy when it comes to treating patients with COVID? Dr. Thiel?
I think, that's a very interesting topic, because in terms of homeopathy in my practice, I also sort of would extend that to the use of vitamins and minerals and lifestyle in general, because homeopathy is a holistic approach to health, and obviously we use the homeopathic remedies and medicines, but I also certainly use all the vitamins and minerals and lifestyle advice that I have at my disposal. So it can be quite controversial too, because we use well, when I say controversial, firstly, we all know that your vitamin Ds, your vitamin Cs, your zincs, your quercetins, all the minerals, and then the homeopathic remedies, whatever suits our patient, that will be prescribed. And that speaks to sort of health in general and the immune system. And I think that's one thing that we've learned in the last year, is that our immune system and our own state of health is vitally important. Because if you look at COVID in general, it has affected those that with comorbidities and the obesities and those at a later sort of stage of life as well. So yes, I mean, if you wanted to go into what has been implemented and the restrictions and all that, I think in my practice I advise we do not the opposite from a law breaking sort of perspective, but we need our vitamin D, we need our sunlight, we need our open air, we need to be in contact with others because we are social beings. We have to interact with others. Social isolation, to me, we know the detrimental effects of that. We know the effects of stress. We know the effects that stress has. Stress is a killer. So, I have a personal sort of issue with regards to the not the dramatization, but the way the mainstream media has sort of portrayed this and has made everyone so fearful, because nothing good comes from that sort of mindset. Use this as an opportunity to educate patients in terms of what is good for them: exercise, outdoors, fresh air. And that's where I've really sort of wanted to focus my intentions and my practice with my patients.
I feel like COVID-19 has actually taken us back to basics, which is family, which is taking care of our basic health, eating healthy, being mindful of our environments, getting out there into sunlight, because these are the basic things that your body needs to thrive and grow. And it's taken such an unfortunate situation to actually take us back to that basic kind of environment where we stem from. Dr. Hariprasad, how has been your perception in practice when it comes to COVID-19 and treating patients? Have you seen a large influx of patients coming in with symptoms?
Yes, I would say since the pandemic has started, my current base of patients, if they tested positive or they've contacted me, if they've had signs and symptoms, and I would send them for testing, there has been a fair amount of patients that I have treated. With majority of them, we would stick to a telephonic consult based on the circumstances at that point in time, and we would somehow get the medication out to them if the patient did not want to come in. And as Dr. Steele had mentioned, the amount of fear and this has put patients into so much anxiety and panic about this entire pandemic. It's actually seeing so much more patients now that are sitting in anxiety and panic and do not want to move from their homes and do not want to let people in. So it's a whole array of what we're treating at the moment. But yes, I have treated quite a fair amount of COVID positive patients right from the start, taken them through the way. It's very important, not just only homeopathically. We had to come in with all the other adjunctives to make sure that we can keep them at bay and not getting them to that serious state where they end up in hospital. And fortunately, that has happened where we've managed to control them, unless somebody was they had underlying comorbidities or went into a serious sort of situation and they couldn't breathe and the oxygen levels were going down. And yes, monitoring them quite fairly closely, then we would ask them to please, get to a hospital at that point in time. But again, if we did the right things right from the start, that actually didn't happen. So that was quite nice to see how homeopathy came in with COVID. And again, as I mentioned earlier, very individualized treatment came in with the COVID-19 signs and symptoms and the pictures that patients were presenting with, because not every patient presented with the same sort of signs and symptoms. So you have a whole array of patients that you're seeing that are positive, and everyone's presenting differently. And this is where you can actually see how homeopathy works, because you are giving them that particular medicine target specific for their signs and symptoms. And that for me was, we know that, we've studied this, we've seen this over the years in practice.
Yeah.
But now when we're sitting in this pandemic, we can actually see how it works.
That's amazing. Dr. Steele, did you also find this as part of your experience as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is such a large sort of array of signs and symptoms that the COVID-19 apparently covers. So most things are labeled as COVID-19, and there's a lot of disagreement amongst the or the professionals out there with regards to the testing and with regards to the accuracy of the
Yeah.
testing out there. So again, with homeopathy, and I use the term homeopathy fairly loosely in that respect, because again, I'm looking at it as a holistic sort of form of healing. And we taking the individual, like Dr. Hope Sut was mentioning, we're taking the individual and their particular signs and symptoms into account. But essentially, it's all aimed at boosting the immune system and getting people out there and getting people healthy. And again, I think it's sad in terms of our mainstream media and the way that it's propagated fear, as opposed to using this opportunity to get the message across to people how important lifestyle is, how important health is, how important nutrition is. And I look at the amount of money that has been spent over the last year in terms of all the implementations, in terms of all these things that have been. I mean, the last time I did any research it was well into the trillions of dollars. And if they had used that money, and put it into a healthy way of life, or nutrition, or improving hygiene and sanitation and things like that, in a number of areas of the world where people are dying of starvation, I think we would save a lot more lives, and we would make people more aware of how important a healthy way of living is. And essentially, going forward, that would be way more beneficial. And again, I'm not pointing fingers, but I think the way it's been handled is
the treatments have been very different. Even in medical practitioners, it's always been a little bit of controversy. We weren't exactly sure. Protocols change consistently because the research changes as well. So you generally have a protocol with COVID-19 patients, and then you follow it, and then you adjust here and there depending on what they present with. Whereas with homeopathy, you're saying you're tailor-making each patient and each treatment protocol per patient. It's not one size fits all, and it's varied accordingly. But that's the basis of the practice in general. Am I right?
Absolutely. So yes, and you tailor it, and you make your assumptions. You see your patient. You sort of sum up all the pros and cons, and you decide on a treatment protocol for that patient. You see how they are progressing on that protocol, and then you should have the ability to change that protocol at any sort of given time, if it's working, if it's not working, specific to that particular patient. And likewise, and from a conventional perspective, it's I don't see the benefit of choosing a particular protocol and then seeing that protocol through to the bitter end, even if it's not working, or if it's costing more lives than it's saving. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Okay. What the beauty of homeopathy is that it's got many adjuncts to it. It's got different modalities, things like biopuncture. You venture into IVF treatment. You can also use herbs. So do you want to talk a little bit more, Dr. Hariprasad, about all the different adjuncts that can make up treatment plan in homeopathy?
Okay, yes. Depending on the practitioner themselves, if they wanting to actually treat only homeopathically, or they're wanting to use an adjunct. So the common adjunctives that we would use are your herbal tinctures or herbal tablets. So herbalism comes in there. There are practitioners that are trained in acupuncture. So that's another modality that would come in. Then we would have biopuncture. Many practitioners are also trained in specifics of biopuncture, which they use as their treatment within their treatment plan. A lot of practitioners, as Dr. Thiel has mentioned, we look at it when a patient sees us. We take it we take the patient as a very holistic sort of picture. So in taking into account what they've come to us for, we would consult, diagnose, send them for bloods, and from there, if they're needing specific supplementation based on the vitamins and minerals, we would assess all of that, and that's what we would do. So adjunctives can vary. Some homeopaths also specialize in iridology. So it just depends on a specific practitioner and what they are comfortable with using as a different modality in treating patients as well.
It's very interesting. There's a lot of misconceptions that people don't realize, that homeopathy has such a vast arrays of advice and modalities that they can use, and there's so many things that you can derive from them. Biopuncture, for one, I've actually tried it myself. It's an incredible tool to have. For those of you that aren't exactly sure, it's very useful, especially in sporting injuries and musculoskeletal. Dr. Thiel, I know you're quite a fay with it. Do you want to expand a little bit more about the biopuncture?
Yes, absolutely. So we use, and particularly with that's a nice sort of connection between the homeopathy and the chiropractic, because I get a lot of sporting injuries and patients coming in where I can use the biopuncture. So we use homeopathic remedies in the injectable form, obviously, and we then inject in those particular areas or wherever need be. So most of the time it's sort of just under the skin, or certain times we need to go a little bit deeper, and we inject. There are a number of products that we use, some of them that we get made up for us, and they're fantastic when you're using it as an adjunctive therapy. So for frozen shoulders to tendinitises to a whole array of problems and that present themselves. And it just does add another dimension to your ability to treat that patient.
That's the beauty of homeopathy. There's such a wide variety of patients that you can see. Like you said, everything from pediatrics to sporting injuries to patients with fertility complications to even animals, like you mentioned. It's quite widely used, and I think when patients understand what's available, that it is another adjunct that they have available in terms of health, if they feel like they want to go in a natural route. And there's plenty of trained practitioners who come in with a vast degree of knowledge behind the science. And there's, like we said, there's plenty of science and research behind the actual profession itself. And I hope to those of you that are listening that it's actually, tonight's actually benefited you in terms of giving you a little bit more insight on homeopathy and what you can do with it and the types of conditions that they actually do treat. So for those of you that do have any questions, you are more than welcome to contact us on 0654211380, where Dr. Hari Prasad and Dr. Thiel would answer any questions. We are coming very close to the end of our show, unfortunately. So I am going to ask each of you separately to be able to, if there's any information that you would like to extend or any myths that you'd like to dispel about homeopathy, what would that be, Dr. Thiel?
Oof, putting me on the spot here. With regards to homeopathy, we don't throw bones. We don't have any chicken bones or anything like that. Well, I certainly don't in my practice. They may be in some other practices, but our medicine, our way of treating is fairly scientifically based, and it is sound, and we do an extensive amount of studying, and there's a lot of sort of backing to what we do in practice. And yeah, I've only seen the benefit of it being in practice for a number of years, and actually seeing it work. I was always very skeptical and had this sort of very skeptical outlook on homeopathy and alternative medicine before I got involved in it. And my sort of belief in it only stemmed from my actually practicing it and seeing the results of it, which has made me a believer, which I'm very, very grateful and very proud to be.
Okay. Dr. Hari Prasad?
Okay, with the practitioners that I've seen, I would say that, a lot of patients out there are seeking help. And a lot of the times you are visiting different doctors or different health specialists, and you're not finding you're not curing what you've diagnosed with. For those of you that are listening and that have heard us speak, I would say try homeopathy as your first choice of medicine, as opposed to being the last and the end of the queue, where you've been around and now let's give homeopathy a shot. And a lot of the times patients have been around, they've had other treatments, and by the time they get to you, they are absolutely desperate because they need for you to fix what they've been suffering for over the months, over the years. And it's at that point where, for myself, I'm just speaking for myself, where you make that shifting sort of in their cure of whatever they they're suffering from. And the patient themselves can see that, oh my word, why didn't I try this earlier? And how did I not know about this? And it's literally as if, you've opened your eyes to a whole new world, and like, I didn't know homeopathy can treat this, and this. So it's about educating. Yes, most patients actually get that faith of seeing a homeopathic practitioner or doctor only until they've visited you and they've seen what you're doing. And yes, and as I said, most think that, oh, no, you're just going to do a 5 or 10 minute consult, and you're just going to give me something, and you're going to give me something that's over the counter, and send you off. So for those of you that are listening, if you're suffering from anything, try homeopathy as your first option. That's what I would say.
Okay. So for our listeners that are listening, I hope today has been very informative to you and opened your eyes a little bit more to the world of homeopathy. An incredible natural complementary medical practice that will aid in your health. Many adjuncts to it, different options, can treat a wide variety of conditions. Get a hold of a homeopath in your area. They're very, very readily available. So try, see how it works. Give us your feedback. Let us know how you think if you've actually visited a homeopath. What is your views and opinions on them? We're always ready to hear from you. 06542111380. Remember, this is your show. You pick our topics and we get the specialists in. So thank you so much for joining me today. You can always catch me every Thursday between 7 to 8 p.m. on Medical Matters on Capital Radio. So I'm going to leave you with one more song from our playlist, and I hope I will see you guys next week. Wherever you are, be safe and cheers.